The dream is to become the strongest swordsman in the world. The path that will lead Zoro to that destination has to be created by his own swords. And at the end of the path, will his swords reach a new level, or will they be just as they are now? So I'll be discussing about the possibilities of Zoro having 3 black blades at the end of the series, and which one of his swords might be the first one to turn into a black blade, and are we going to see this phenomena in Wano? But before moving on, I publish new One Piece theories every week, so make sure that you don't miss any future One Piece videos by subscribing to the channel and hit the bell icon for notifications. Now starting with, what is a black blade? Black blades, which are also referred to as kokutos, we have only seen 2 of them thus far. Those being Mihawk's Yoru, which is one of the 12 supreme great swords, and Ryuma's Shusui, that is one of the 21 great swords. And in terms of how a sword turns into a black blade, it still isn't clearly explained in the story, and I'll address this a bit later in the discussion. Now, arriving almost 1000 chapters in the manga, we haven't seen more than 2 black blades, which indicates how rare of a thing these are and also symbolizes the greatness of their wielders, as Mihawk and Ryuma both are and were the strongest swordsmen of their time. Now Zoro, who is going to be the strongest swordsman after Mihawk, it's presumable that he will also forge his own black blades by the end of the series. But will all of his swords turn into black blades, or will it just be one? In the case of Mihawk and Ryuma, it's not like that they managed to turn only one sword into black blade, but the fact is they're both users of one sword style. And I bet if they were users of 2 sword style, they would have turned both of their swords into black blades. Now it's still not confirmed that Mihawk was the one who turned Yoru into a black blade, but how he always mentions it and even said to Zoro that anyone could turn a sword into a black blade.
世界最強のこの黒刀で沈めてやる。黒刀からどう逃がす。すべての刀剣は黒刀になりうる。
It gives me the feeling that if he hadn't forged a black blade on his own, he wouldn't have talked about it like that. So in case of Zoro, who uses 3 sword style and also has the resolve to become the strongest swordsman in the world, it wouldn't be surprising if he turns all 3 of his swords into black blades. Now Zoro might be getting a new sword in Wano, and I have a video on how Nidai Kitetsu will be replacing the Sandai Kitetsu, and if you want to check that out, the link is in the description. So if Zoro gets the Nidai Kitetsu in Wano, I think it will be an indication that at some point in the future, he will also get his hands on the Shodai Kitetsu, making him the first ever swordsman who wielded all of the cursed Kitetsu swords. And Shodai Kitetsu is confirmed to be one of the 12 supreme great swords, so I think there's a high possibility that it's already a black blade. In that case, if Zoro gets the Shodai Kitetsu, he will only need to turn Enma and Wado Ichimonji into black blades. Again, if Zoro ends up being the one to kill Kaido, there's a possibility that he will get Shusui back, replacing Enma, and Wado Ichimonji might be the only sword that will turn into a black blade in Zoro's hands. Now the idea of Zoro turning all of his swords into black blades on his own entertains me more, but it's not that of a small feat to achieve. Still, whatever way it takes, I do believe that we will see Zoro wielding 3 black blades at the end of the series. Now the question is how to forge a black blade. And the answer to that question is still unclear at this point. At least we know the fact that swordsmiths have nothing to do with this. The swordsman is the one who is responsible for it. Now there's only 2 clues we have about forging a black blade. First, it obviously involves armament haki. Second, it's related to having countless battles. But I don't think these are the only 2 things required. There must be something else missing here. Otherwise, you would have seen many black blades until this point. There are lots of people who have imbued their weapons in haki and have countless battles with it, like Shanks, Whitebeard, Oden, Rayleigh, Roger. All of them are legendary figures with monstrous strength and have been through countless fights in their life. Even every one of them have mastery of all 3 types of haki. So why didn't their weapons turn into black blades? What is the missing piece of puzzle here? And at this point, I have only one logical explanation for this. If we look at Mihawk and Ryuma, there's only one thing similar between them. Both of them had the will to become the strongest swordsmen, to stand on top in their respective eras. So the will to become the strongest might be a necessary thing in forging a black blade, and when a sword turns into a black blade, it obviously becomes more sharper and durable. Basically, it ends up being stronger than its former self, which is kind of similar to its user. Like when a swordsman who possesses a strong will to become more stronger with each passing battle, at a certain point the sword also ends up sharing the same fate of its user and ultimately becomes a better sword in the process. Basically, it's the manifestation of a swordsman's will in his sword. So at this point, to me, the steps of forging a black blade are first imbuing the sword with haki, because haki is spiritual power, and when it flows through the sword, it connects with its user and follow the user's will. Then second, sharing the emotions and intent with the sword through countless battles. And last, having a strong will to achieve something greater, which ultimately ends up manifesting within the sword. So to summarize this, a black blade is a symbol of the deep connection between the sword and its user, and a proof of their countless battles together. And if we look at Zoro, he definitely shares a deep bond with his swords, as they are like an extension of his body and doesn't feel comfortable without them by his side. And Wado Ichimonji is the only sword that he has been using since the beginning. As a result, he has fought most of his battles with it, and obviously he shares a deep connection with this sword. It's also a moment of kuina and a reminder of his goal to be the strongest swordsman in the world. So I think Wado Ichimonji has to be the first sword to turn into a black blade in Zoro's hands. Obviously Enma can suck a large amount of haki, but as I've said, haki might not be the only thing that makes a black blade. So if Enma sticks to Zoro till the end, at some point it will most probably turn into a black blade, but I'm rooting for Wado Ichimonji to be the first one. Now are we going to see Zoro turning a sword into a black blade in Wano? And regarding this, in One Piece chapter 937, when Zoro was chasing Gyukimaru for Shusui, Gyukimaru said that Shusui became a black blade through its countless battles with Ryuma, and that piqued Zoro's interest as he has been always curious about black blades.
そういや気になってた。黒刀ってのはまさか。
So is it some kind of a foreshadowing from Oda that Zoro will have his own black blade in Wano? Again, in chapter 955, Hitetsu mentions that Enma has yet to become a black blade, and in Zoro's hands it will reach that level. And Zoro's reaction to that says he still doesn't have a clue on how to turn his swords into a black blade. So Oda is obviously foreshadowing that Zoro will forge his own black blades at some point, but to me, the possibility of this happening in Wano is not that high. Now for quite some time I thought that we will see this in this arc because of the foreshadowing, but just because Oda mentioned black blades 2 times in this arc doesn't mean that we will get to see this in Wano. Like how Oda has been mentioning Devil Fruit Awakening with Doflamingo and Katakuri, but still we haven't seen any sign of that from Luffy. And regarding Zoro, I think Oda will be focusing on other things in this arc, like the mystery of his left eye, his mastery of Enma, maybe even about Zoro having Conqueror's Haki, then going through his origin, and at last, him getting a new sword. So there's a lot of things to focus on in this arc, and that's why Oda might be setting up the context of Black Blade in Wano to reveal it in the next arc or sometime later in the story. We might see Zoro figuring out some sort of clues or realizing how to forge a black blade by the end of Wano arc, but I think you will still need some more time to achieve this. Now you've come this far in this video, so don't forget to subscribe the channel and ring the bell to get notified. Comment your thoughts on the discussion and any theory that you might have on this. Thanks for watching.